Okay, good afternoon everybody. Welcome to the training module for BCA performance-based requirements. I see we've got Ben and Daniel there. Can you guys hear me all right? There's a little chat box if you can hear me down the bottom of your screen. I'll put a message in there just to make sure you can hear me all right. Okay, that's good. Yep, so everything's working. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll get started with our presentation that I'm going to record, and we'll be putting it online on the Moodle site probably later today or Monday, so you can look at it any time, and anyone who wasn't available to see it will be able to see it. So we're looking at the BCA performance-based requirements, and this is a presentation that's been provided by the Australian Building Codes Board. Should be quite useful, and I'll go through it all. I've cut a bit of it out that probably isn't as needed at this stage, but if anyone's got any questions, just please ask and we can answer them. Okay, we've got Richard online. I can see you there, Richard. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Daryl.
Oh, good.
Coming through very well.
Excellent. I can see and hear you well. Okay, we'll get started now. So this is as it says, a training module developed by ABCB who are in charge of the Australian Building Codes Board, and it's one of a series that they did with understanding the BCA. So this one's performance-based legislation. So in the outline of this module, we're looking at approval of alternative solutions, which is assessment methods, verification method, expert judgment or comparison with deemed to satisfy. We won't be looking at all of these in detail, but it'll be an overview of the performance-based legislation. So first of all is a little bit of background in performance-based legislation and compared to prescriptive legislation. So prescriptive legislation are building regulations written in a prescriptive manner that prescribe when you have to do something, what you must do, and how you must do it. The regulations set minimum standards for building design that must be followed. So the prescriptive legislation now would be in the laws and acts quite often. A building regulation would specify prescriptive outcomes rather than performance that you would not see in the legislation. With prescriptive legislation, approval to use alternative methods were previously sought through tribunals or courts. The initial BCAs were predominantly written in prescriptive terms, but between 1994 and 96, the ABCB converted the BCA 1990 into a fully performance-based document. So now, if you need to go to tribunals, it's generally something to do with planning schemes, although you can go to tribunals for the BCA still. An example of prescriptive regulation in the BCA 90 was for natural light for housing, that stated in a Class 1 building a required window that faces a boundary of any adjoining allotment must not be less than a horizontal distance of 900 millimetres from that boundary. So that was it. It was just a straight prescriptive requirement. It is evident from the use of the word must that the clause is prescribing a minimum horizontal separation between a boundary line and a required window. A lesser distance would not have been allowed without a dispensation of some form from the regulatory authority. So it would be a form of alternative solution, but there was no qualifiable performance-based benchmark to measure it against. So that's the 900 mil distance as it was. Why was the minimum 900 mil required? Could a less space achieve the required result? And this is a similar sort of problem as you're seeing in your assignment question for the ceiling height. So we'll work through a little bit of that. So what are performance-based requirements? Performance-based regulations differ that they set levels of performance that must be achieved. Performance-based regulation is also referred to as objective-based regulation. In essence, building regulations set mandatory levels of performance required by governments to achieve community expectation. So that's our performance. Performance-based regulations do not dictate how to achieve required results. Any acceptable decision can be approved. BCA provides standard solutions that may be used. These are optional, and the standard solutions are the deemed to satisfy provisions. And most people in domestic construction use the DTS provisions because it's a known outcome. It's easy to work with, everyone's happy. But sometimes you won't be able to comply with the DTS, or sometimes you've got a new way of doing something that isn't recognised by the DTS, so you'll look at performance. So this is, don't worry about Module 1, that was an introductory one that we haven't looked at, but we've got the performance requirements that are mandatory. Whatever you do, you must meet those. Now, how you can meet them is either by an alternative solution or a DTS provision. It doesn't matter which you use, but it must meet those performance requirements. Okay, so a prescriptive requirement for 900 mil space in BCA 90, and we discussed a prescriptive requirement for 900 mil space in BCA 90 and accepted less space could achieve the same result in some cases. Let's discuss how that prescriptive requirement could be addressed as a performance requirement. So that's our 900 mil distance again, and if we wanted to come in less than that as an alternative solution. Okay, so the performance requirement states a habitable room must be provided with windows so that natural light, when available, provides a level of illuminance appropriate to the function or use of that part of the building. The performance requirement does not set a minimum distance from windows to an allotment boundary, but note the words they use, such as appropriate to the function or use of that part of the building. So that gives you a bit of an idea how you might be able to set up a performance requirement or an alternative solution that satisfied this performance requirement. Where the performance requirement is silent on a suitable distance, a relevant DTS provision does address the distance. So the clause out of Volume 2 of the BCA states, a window required to provide light that faces a boundary of an adjoining allotment must not be less than a horizontal distance of 900 mil from the boundary. So that's the old prescriptive requirement out of BCA 90, essentially, that's been brought across as the deemed to satisfy provision for the BCA 2011 as it is at the moment, or 2010. The language used in certain performance requirements may be new to some practitioners. Several performance requirements contain two particular phrases that need to be understood in order to ensure the benefits of performance-based BCA are maximised. Sorry about that. To the degree necessary. This phrase means an alternative solution must achieve the result specified in the performance requirement to the degree necessary. The inclusion of this term means that in certain situations it may not be necessary to do anything specific in order to comply with the requirement. So that's the first one, to the degree necessary. The second one is appropriate to. The inclusion of the phrase appropriate to in performance requirements means that practitioners must consider all criteria listed under that phrase when developing or assessing an alternative solution. So if we look at those ones again, to the degree necessary, it means that you may have some flexibility in how you apply that performance requirement. Okay. Appropriate to means that practitioners must consider all criteria listed under that phrase when developing or assessing an alternative solution. So you don't have any flexibility in that one, whereas in this one, you may have some flexibility to the degree necessary. Okay, so does everybody understand that? Okay, everybody can hear me still all right? Yep. Yep. Okay. Now, an example of these terms used in EP 1.4, which is out of Volume 1, an automatic fire suppression system must be installed to the degree necessary to control the development and spread of fire appropriate to the size of the fire compartment, function of the building hazard, and the height of the building. So that's to the degree necessary. So that's the one that has some flexibility. Okay. A number of pointers are evidence in the wording because it tells us that an automatic fire suppression system must be installed to the degree necessary. This means you do not have to install an automatic fire suppression system if you can demonstrate that it is not needed. The next words in EP 1.4 are to control the development and spread of fire. These words explain why an automatic fire suppression system is required to be installed, so to control the development and spread of fire. Therefore, if the same result can be achieved by an alternative solution, there is no need to install an automatic fire suppression system. What this language tells us, the next words in EP 1.4 are appropriate to the size of the fire compartment and the function or use of the building and the fire hazard and the height of the building. The four issues listed in A to D are issues that must be considered by the development of any respective alternative solution. And you see the word "and" being used here? It means you need to read them in conjunction with each other. If it's an "or," it's a one or the other, but when it's an "and," it's all of them have to be considered. So whenever you see "and" used in the BCA, keep reading because you have to keep complying. If you see "or" used, you can pick one or the other. It gives you an option there. So it's important to understand that. Therefore, in reviewing the wording of Performance Requirement EP 1.4, a significant amount of information has been gleaned. At present, not all performance requirements have wording of similar substance to allow such analysis, and I think our ceiling height example may be one that is not quite as well populated with information. Compliance with the performance requirements is mandatory. Performance-based regulations simply tell us the results we must achieve. So does everybody understand that it is mandatory and it is the goal that we seek? How you achieve that, that's up to you, but you must achieve it. Benefits of performance-based codes are cost effectiveness, constructability, and incorporate innovation, which they do. It's a lot easier to go with a performance-based system. So performance requirements are written in either qualitative or quantitative terms. The use of the term to the degree necessary means it may not be necessary to do anything specific in order to comply. The use of the term appropriate to means that you must at least address the points listed when proposing an alternative solution. So part 2 now, we'll move on to developing alternative solutions. Option to include alternative solutions. To comply with the requirements of the BCA, some practitioners will simply choose to follow the DTS provisions. However, it's sometimes preferable to offer an alternative solution or develop an alternative solution. There's our alternate DTS to meet the performance again. When developing a building design, it is possible to disregard all relevant deemed to satisfy provisions of the BCA. However, building designs usually incorporate a combination of deemed to satisfy and alternative solutions.